everyone, Miss Pak here again from Mirror Lake. Thanks for joining today. Let's go ahead and jump into the target. Go ahead and read that with me. Ready, go. I will identify, there's eyeballs there to look for, the suffix full or fully while we're reading today. Full or fully, that means full of. So let's take a look at a couple examples before we look for them. Here's the word beauty. If we add the suffix full to it, that word becomes beautiful. Notice the spelling changes a little bit. But what does beautiful mean? It literally means full of beauty. Then down here we have another example, the word careful. Let's add the suffix fully to it. Notice it's underlined at the bottom there. And carefully means, you guessed it, full of care. So those are the suffixes we're going to be looking for, and the suffixes come at the end of the word. Are you ready? Let's get started. The book I have for you today is called The Name Jar by Young Suk Choi. I'm making predictions already about what this book is going to be about. Here's the inside cover. Through the school bus window, Yun-hee looked out at the strange buildings and houses on the way to her new school. It was her first day, and she was both nervous and excited. Wondering if you've ever felt the same way she has before. She fingered the little block of wood in her pocket and remembered leaving her grandmother at the airport in Korea. Her grandmother had wiped away Yun-hae's tears and handed her an ink pad and a small red satin pouch. Your name is inside, she had said. My name? Yun-hae had wondered. Again, she took out the red pouch to look at the wooden block with her name carved in it. As she ran her fingers along the grooves and ridges of the Korean characters, she pictured her grandmother's smile. Is that thing for show and tell? A boy asked Yun-hae, surprising her. Yun-hae looked up as more kids leaned over. No, it's mine, Yun-hae answered, quickly putting the pouch back in her pocket. Are you new here? What's your name? A girl asked. Yun-hae, said Yun-hae. Une? The girl asked, scrunching up her face. Uni, some kids chanted. No, Yun-hae corrected. It's spelled Unhei. It's pronounced Yun-hae. Oh, it's Yuhei, the boy said. Like Yuhei. What about hey you? Just then, the bus pulled up to the school and the doors opened. Yun-hae hurried to get off. Yuhei, bye-bye, the kids yelled as she left. Yun-hae felt herself blush. And I want to make an inference right now on how you think she's feeling. After all that, remember, an inference is the text, what we just read, plus background knowledge, what you already know. So making a good guess based on the text evidence and what we know already. So I infer Yun-hae is feeling excited. Do you think she's happy about school or she's nervous? When she's herself is blushing, finds herself blushing, that makes me think she's not feeling very happy. Maybe she's a little embarrassed. People kind of are making fun of her name. I wonder if anyone has any similar experiences to that. Yun-hae stood in the doorway of her new noisy classroom. She was relieved that the kids on the bus had gone to other rooms, but her face still felt red. Aren't you going in? Asked a curly-haired boy with lots of dots on his face. You're the new girl, right? He asked cheerfully. Yun-hae nodded, and before she could walk away, the boy took her hand and pulled her through the door. Here's the new girl, he announced so loudly that the teacher, Mr. Cockatoos, almost dropped his glasses. Mr. Cockatoos thanked him and greeted Yun-hae. Please welcome our newest student, he said to the class. She and her family just arrived from Korea last week. Yun-hae smiled broadly and tried not to show her nervousness. What's your name? Someone shouted. Yun-hae pictured the kids on the bus. I haven't picked one yet, she told the class, but I'll let you know by next week. As Mr. Cockatoos showed her to her desk, she felt many round, curious eyes on her. Why doesn't she have a name? She heard someone whisper. Maybe she robbed a bank in Korea and needs a new identity, a boy replied. I have here, I see the suffix fully. What does that mean again? That's right, full of. So full of cheer. On the bus home, nobody teased her, but Yunhai kept thinking about her name. How was school, Yunhai? Her mother asked when she walked in. Did you understand the teacher? Yunhai simply nodded. She unpacked her school bag and set the red pouch by a photograph of her grandma. I'm glad you are learning English well, her mother said. You must study hard, behave nicely, and get good grades to show you're a good Korean. I will, replied Yunhai, but I think I would like my own American name, she said quickly. Her mother looked at her with surprise. Why? Yunhai is a beautiful name. Your grandma and I went to a name master for it. But it's so hard to pronounce, Yunhai complained. I don't want to be different from all the American kids. You are different, Yunhai, her mother said. That's a good thing. Yunhai just wrinkled her nose, wondering how they're both feeling based on their facial expressions and what they said here. You can also make a prediction now. Remember, that's what you think is going to happen next, or by the end of the story, what's going to happen. Remember, it's okay if you're right or wrong. Just make sure you have some evidence to support it. You can think in your head now, do you predict she's going to change her name or keep her name? Keep that in your head. Later that day, Yunhai and her mother went grocery shopping in their new neighborhood. They passed Fadil's Falafel, Tony's Pizza, and Dot's Deli. A big graffiti-painted garbage truck roared like a lion as it took off down the street. Nothing sounded or looked familiar until they got to Kim's Market. The sign was in both English and Korean. Her mother picked up cabbage to make kimchi, Korean style spicy pickled cabbage, and other vegetables and meat. She also found some seaweed, Yunhai's favorite, for soup. It made Yunhai smile. Just because we've moved to America, her mother said, doesn't mean we stop eating Korean food. At the checkout counter, a friendly man smiled at Yunhai. Helping your mother with the shopping, he asked. Yunhai nodded. I'm Mr. Kim, he said, and what is your name? Yunhai, she answered. What a beautiful name, he said. Doesn't it mean grace? Yunhai nodded again. My mother and grandmother went to a name master for it, she told him. A graceful name for a graceful girl, Mr. Kim said, as he put their groceries into bags. Welcome to the neighborhood, Yunhai. There's that suffix again. If you're writing this down or want to keep track of it, that's one word you can write down right now. That evening, Yunhai stood in front of the bathroom mirror. Hi, my name is Amanda, she said cheerfully. Then she wrinkled her nose. Hi, my name is Laura. Maybe not. Her smile turned down. Nothing sounded right. Nothing felt right. I don't think American kids will like me, she worried as she began to brush her teeth. Hi, my name is Susie, she said to the mirror with her mouth full of toothpaste. And we can think right here, what is she doing? It sounds like she's trying to test out different names, different American names. And is she feeling okay about that? It sounds like she's kind of worrying and just practicing introducing herself, and she's saying, nothing's feeling right. The next morning, when Yunhai arrived at school, she found a glass jar on the desk with some pieces of paper in it. Yunhai took out one and read it aloud. Daisy. That's my baby sister's nickname, but she said you can use it if you want, said Cindy, who sat next to her. Yunhai took out the rest of the paper. Tamala, she read. I got it from a storybook, said Nate. She was smart and brave. Yunhai nodded and unfolded another piece. Wednesday? Yeah, you came here on Wednesday, said Ralph. Thank you for your help. A smile spread over Yunhai's face. Ralph quickly said, we'll put more names in. You can pick whatever you like, or pick them all, and you'll have the longest name in history. I'm wondering how she's feeling. That's very nice of her classmates to do that because she said, I don't have a name yet. So they're all putting in different names and different suggestions. At 3 o'clock, the bell rang for the end of the school day. Yunhai looked out the window and saw it was sprinkling. It's the same rain, she thought, but in a different place. She watched over kids leaving in groups. Hey, a familiar voice called out to her. Yunhai turned around to see the curly-haired boy again. I'm Joey, he said, and you? You don't have any name? Yunhai thought for a moment. Well, I can show you, she said, and took out the small red pouch. She pressed the wooden block on the ink pad and then stamped it on a piece of paper. This is my name stamp, she said. My grandma gave it to me. In Korea, I can use it as a signature when I open a bank account or write a letter. And whenever I miss my grandma, I use it to fill a piece of paper. Want to try it? She offered the stamp to Joey, and he carefully inked the stamp and pressed it hard on the paper. The red characters gleamed against the whiteness. Wow, that's beautiful, Joey said. Can I keep the paper? Sure, Yunhai said. And then the two of them shared her umbrella as they walked to the school bus. There's another word there. I think we found that word already, but if you're keeping track, that word carefully. Remember, what does that mean? Full of care. Every day, the jar got fuller with more names, and Yunhai read them all. She found a few names she liked. Miranda, Stella, Avery. They sounded interesting. I hope you choose the name I put in, Marco told her at snack time. I've put in 3 more, said Ralph. Madison, Park, and Lex. They're my favorite street names. Maybe you should close your eyes and draw a name, Rosie suggested. Ralph frowned. That's silly. What if she doesn't like the name she draws? Well, we didn't get to choose our names when we were born, did we? Rosie argued. Everyone thought about this. That's right, your parents or somebody special chose your name. When Yunhai got home from school that day, her little brother ran to give her a letter. It was from her grandma. She opened it quickly. It said, To my Yunhai, I hope you are enjoying your new school and new friends. Be sure to help your mother and little brother. Here the moon is up, but there the sun is up. No matter how far apart we are and no matter how different America is from Korea, you'll always be my Yunhai, your grandma forever. Yunhai took out her wooden stamp and filled a paper with it. She thought for a long time in front of the bathroom mirror. Check your prediction right now. Did it change or did it stay the same? What do you think she's going to do? On Saturday, Yunhai walked to Mr. Kim's store. Mr. Kim was helping a customer, but he looked up and greeted her. Hi, Yunhai. Hello, Mr. Kim, Yunhai replied. She felt as if she was back in her old neighborhood in Korea. Hey, said the customer, turning around. It was Joey. Your name is Eunhee? He asked with his eyes open wide. Yunhai looked quickly at Mr. Kim, then turned to Joey. She nodded slowly. Yes, it's pronounced Yunhai. It means grace, Mr. Kim added. Yunhai, Joey said slowly, and this time perfectly. It made Yunhai smile. I'll have it ready for you tomorrow, said Mr. Kim to Joey. Thank you, Mr. Kim. See you Monday, Yunhai, Joey said to her. He left before she could ask him why he was at the store. On Monday, Yunhai came to class early to look at the names one last time, but the jar wasn't on her desk. Instead, there was just a single piece of paper with a name on it. Yunhai slipped it in her pocket. Where's your name jar? Ralph asked as soon as he saw it was gone. I don't know, Yunhai said. It wasn't on Mr. Kakato's desk or on any other desk, and it wasn't on the counters or any of the shelves. As other kids arrived, they helped look. Soon, Mr. Kakato's came in and Ralph shouted at him, The name jar is gone! The jar with all the names in it! Gone, Mr. Kakato's replied. With a look of concern, he asked Yunhai, Did you get a chance to read all the names? Yunhai nodded. She took a breath. I'm ready to introduce myself, she said. Make your prediction quick in your head. What do you think? Yunhai wrote her name in both English and Korean on the chalkboard. I like the beautiful names and funny names you thought of for me, she told the class, but I realized that I like my name, so best, so I chose it again. Korean names mean something. Yunhai means grace. Grace! Grace Inhai, shouted Ralph. Everyone tried to say it. Yunhei, Anye, Ane. Yunhai said her name again, slowly and clearly. Soon the kids began to say it better, even Mr. Cockatoos. They applauded Yunhai's choice. I was named after a flower, Rosie whispered to Yunhai. Lots of American names have meanings too, Mr. Cockatoos reminded everyone. When the class was dismissed, Yunai heard her new friend say goodbye. Bye, Yunai. See you tomorrow. Goodbye, Yunai. Yunai said goodbye and then looked around for Joey, but he was already gone. Was your prediction right that she'd keep her name, or was it wrong? And that's okay if it was wrong. Yunai, come downstairs, Mother called up to Yunhai. Your friend is here. Yunhai rushed down to see who she meant. There stood Joey, and in his arms was the name jar. Where did you find it? Asked Yunhai breathlessly. Joey looked embarrassed. Well, I took it, but only because I wanted you to keep your own name, and you did. He reached in and pulled out all the names. Do you want to keep them? He asked. Thank you. I'll keep them as a souvenir, Yunhai said happily. Then she pulled out the piece of paper from her pocket. Do you want this back? Joey grinned. You can keep it. I'll return the name jar to the class. Maybe you could put some Korean nicknames in it for us. Names with good meanings. I could do that, agreed Yunhai. I've already got a Korean nickname, Joey said. Mr. Kim helped me choose it. Carefully, he pulled a small silver felt pouch from his pocket. Then he took out a dark wooden stamp with beautiful Korean characters carved sharply into it. He pressed it on the ink pad and then on the piece of paper next to her name. Chingu, read Yunhai. That means friend. And Chingu smiled back. Let's take a look at what the lesson or central message might be. Remember, that means what the author wants me to learn. So there's some clues to help us determine the lesson of a story. So let's think about Yunhai, the main character, and what she learned in the story. So here's a sentence stem in the red, if you can see that. So the lesson of the name jar, you put the title in, is, what do you think the lesson was? And then because. Remember, we always need some evidence from the text. So what do you think the lesson of that was? Why did the author write that story? And what do you think she wanted us to learn from the story? So I'm thinking about what Yunhai's problem was in the story, and then also thinking what she learned from it. What did she end up doing? Did she change her name or did she keep it? That's right, she kept her name, right? But she did think about changing her name to an American name and it was kind of frustrating and embarrassing for her when other kids couldn't pronounce it. So I think the lesson of that story was that you should be proud of who you are and where you come from. And I think a good lesson that the kids learned was they can practice each other's names. And I love how kind they were with each other. At the beginning, maybe on the bus, she didn't have the best experience, but her classmates really stood around her and helped her feel comfortable with her name. And she taught it to them calmly, and they practiced her name to say it properly. So I think the lesson is be true to yourself and who you are. And I feel like some of you might have an experience like that too, that you can relate to her. Awesome job today. Thanks for helping and joining. See ya.
Hello, and welcome back to all you amazing math problem solvers out there. This is Mrs. Nelson, just on a third grade math adventure with you this summer. And the last few episodes of our lessons, we have been working on multiplication and division. understanding what multiplication and division mean and practicing all kinds of different strategies we can use to solve multiplication and division problems. This week, we are totally flipping into something new. We are going to explore, get ready, fractions. So today is our first day. I'll show that poster again in a moment, but today is our first day on fractions. So really what today's goal is to understand what a fraction is and what a fraction looks like, and to learn a little bit about the numbers in a fraction and what they mean and what they're called. So the learning target today, I'll show in a moment, but your goal today is to be able to, at the end of our lesson, say what a fraction is using the sentence frame. A fraction is, or fractions are, and then also be able to tell what each number in a fraction is called and what each number in a fraction means or stands for. So that's our goal today. We're going to first dig into looking at fractions in our real lives and see some examples of when we actually use fractions and see them in the real world. So get ready, and that's what we're going to jump into next. All right, so as I mentioned, we're going to dive into what even is a fraction before we start talking about how to define it and show some examples. So first, here on this poster is a fraction. This is what a fraction looks like as a number. So when we work with numbers in math, our numbers that we are more used to seeing and working with look like that, right? So there's the number 2. If you cover up the line and the 5 on the bottom, we would just say that would be the number 2. And we call numbers like that our whole numbers. So when we're talking about the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on, those are all of our whole numbers. And the reason we call them our whole numbers is because the other numbers we work with in math are called fractions, and they look like this. So there's a number on the top, and then a line, and then a number on the bottom. And fractions are actually numbers that stand for parts of a whole. And what's really important about fractions is that they stand for equal parts of a whole. So right now I want us to think about the two words I just said, parts and whole. Think about if you had a whole pizza, like on the poster, right? And usually, unless you're really hungry, you don't just eat one whole pizza all to yourself. Usually when you eat pizza, a pizza is broken or split or cut into parts or slices, right? So think of a fraction as like a slice of pizza. We're taking a whole and we're dividing it or splitting it into equal parts, equal sized pieces. And the fraction is the number that names those equal parts that we're talking about. So in this example, we have a whole pizza. It's been cut into 4 equally sized slices. Can you see those 4 slices? And if I were talking about one of those slices, the number or the fraction that would represent or stand for one of those slices would look like this, with a 1 on top and then the line and a 4 on the bottom. And we would say that fraction or read that fraction as 1/4. So that's what this says down here. That's what that fraction is called. When you look at a fraction with a 1 on the top and a 4 on the bottom, we call that 1/4. And all that means is it's naming one out of the 4 equal parts that we split the whole into. So in this case, one slice of pizza would be 1/4 of the whole pizza. So that's just a really quick explanation of what fractions are. They are numbers that stand for or represent equal parts of a whole. So now let's look at some other examples besides pizza where we see fractions in our lives. We are exploring today what are fractions. And even though I already kind of just explained and talked about what they mean, here's that definition for you again. Fractions are numbers that represent or stand for equal parts of a whole. And on the screen here, you can see some different examples besides pizza. I have pizza on here again as an example, but there's other things we might think about when we're talking about splitting a whole something into equal parts. And usually in real life, we see fractions the most in cooking and eating and related to food. But we also can see fractions in measurement. So think about like if you were measuring something in inches and maybe something has 1/2 inches or 1/4 inches of length. We can also think about fractions with money, thinking about how we don't always pay for things in whole dollars, right? Sometimes we might be paying for something with quarters, which, if you think about how many quarters make a dollar, there are 4 quarters. So 1/4 of a dollar would be a quarter or 25 cents. So I don't have a picture of money here, but that is another place in our lives where we use and see fractions. Remember, one of the important things is that they are equal size parts. So that's a big thing to just remember in the back of your mind whenever you're working with fractions. When we're talking about the parts of a whole, if they're not equal sizes, then they would not be considered fractions. So on this little picture with the different shapes, I think this is a really nice picture to see what different sized fractions can look like depending on how the whole is broken apart. So the triangle, you can see there's a line drawn to split it into 2 equal parts. So they've shaded one of those 2 parts green, and underneath they've written 1 and then a line and then 2. But just want to remind you that the numbers in the fraction each are important because they each are telling a different thing. So the number on the top is talking about how many parts are shaded or how many parts are we looking at. So in this case of the triangle, we see one part is shaded. So we have a 1 on top. And the number on the bottom is talking about how many parts did we split the whole into altogether. So the triangle is split into 2 parts altogether with one of them shaded. So then we would say 1/2 of that triangle is green. The next example, the square, we see the square is split into 4 equal parts altogether, and one of those parts is blue. And on the next screen, we're going to dive a little bit more into naming the fractions and reading them. So here are some different fraction unit names that we use and say. When we're talking about 2 equal parts, we call those parts halves, or we say that we've broken the whole into halves. When we're talking about 3 equal parts, we would call those fractional units thirds. The name for breaking a whole into 4 equal parts, we would call each of those parts fourths. 5 equal parts, we would call fifths. 6 equal parts, we would call sixths. 7 equal parts, we would call sevenths. If we had 8 equal parts, like on the lemon picture here, we would call each of those parts eighths. Now let's talk about those numbers in the fraction and what makes them special. One thing to know is in a fraction, we always have 2 numbers, one on top and 1 on bottom. And each of those numbers has a special name. So here on the screen, you can see an example fraction here. 1/2 is how we would read that fraction. 1 out of 2 equal parts would be 1/2. And the top number in any fraction, so the 1 on this example, is called the numerator. So go ahead and practice saying that. Numerator. Good. And the numerator is the number on top, and it tells how many parts are shaded or how many parts we are thinking about out of the whole. The bottom number in a fraction is called the denominator. And the way I remember that the bottom number is the denominator is I think about it being the down low number. And denominator starts with D, just like down low. And so that kind of helps me remember. It's the number that goes down on the bottom. And the denominator, it tells us how many parts the whole is broken into altogether. So if we had a whole pizza and we cut it into 2 equal parts, then that denominator 2 is telling us that the whole is split into 2 equal parts. If I eat one of those parts, that's what the numerator is telling me. Or if I shade one of those parts, and then we would say, I have eaten, or I have 1/2 of the pizza. So again, each of the numbers in our fraction has a special name. The top number is called, that's right, the numerator. And the bottom number, a little harder to say, very good, is called the denominator. So just get some practice naming the numbers in the fraction, numerators on top, denominators on the bottom, and then remember what each number means. And we'll look at some more examples in a second. So I just want to do a quick example talking about a fraction and how to write and name the numerator and the denominator. So looking at this orange, if you can see, this orange is broken into, this whole orange is broken into 8 equal parts or 8 equal sections or segments. If I were to write a fraction to show how much of the orange I'm going to eat, I know the number on the bottom, the denominator, is 8 because that is how many slices or pieces the orange is broken into altogether. And I want to eat 4 of those slices. So if I were going to write the fraction that names how many slices of the orange I'm eating, my numerator is telling how many pieces I'm eating. I'm eating 4 pieces. So the fraction of the orange that I'm eating is 4/8. 4, the numerator, is how many pieces I'm eating. And 8, the denominator, is how many pieces the whole orange was broken into. So in a moment, we're going to just check and see if you learned anything today. And by the way, for today's lesson, you can just say your answer out loud and talk about it. I'm going to give you a little question sentence frame to fill in the blanks on. Or if you'd rather write your answers down, you could use a piece of paper and something to write with. But a quick review before we get to your task. Just want to explain again that fractions are numbers that stand for equal parts of a whole. And in a fraction, we always have 2 numbers, a number on the top and a number on the bottom. The number on the top is called the numerator, and it tells us how many parts we are thinking about or how many parts are shaded or colored in. And the number on the bottom, the denominator, tells us how many parts the whole is broken into altogether. So now it's your turn to see if you learned anything today. Get ready to see what you learned today. So on the screen, here's our learning target. I will explain what a fraction is and what each number in the fraction means. And to be successful in the bottom sentence frame here, I'm hoping that you can fill the sentence frame in or complete it with words and by saying out loud what goes in the blanks. So fractions are, or you could say a fraction is, and then give a definition or explain what it means. Then it says the number on top is called the blank, and it tells blank. So the next thing you're doing is thinking about what that top number is called, if you can remember the name, and what does it stand for or what does it mean in the fraction. And the number on the bottom is called the blank, and it tells blank. So also giving the name for the bottom number in a fraction and what it stands for. Do your best. Remember, you can say it out loud, maybe to somebody in your family who's watching the video with you if you have somebody close by, or you can write your answers down and I will reveal the correct answer or some things you could have written in a moment. To kind of get you thinking about if you gave the right names for each of the numbers. And don't worry about spelling as long as you were close on being able to say that the top number is the numerator and the bottom number is the denominator. And on my next screen, this is an example of how you might have filled out the whole sentence frame. So fractions are numbers that name or represent or stand for equal parts of a whole. The biggest thing in your definition is making sure to include that they are telling about equal parts of a whole. And the number on top, again, is the numerator, and it tells how many parts are shaded or how many parts are eaten, if we're thinking about like slices of pizza or pieces of an orange. The number on the bottom is called the denominator, and it tells how many equal parts the whole is broken into all together. So how did you do? Think about your answers and if they were at least close to what these are showing today. The main goal of today is just being able to understand what fractions are and what we call those two numbers in the fraction and what they stand for. So that was all for today, just exploring and thinking about what fractions are, where we might see them in our real lives, and to get a little more practice to just deepen your understanding of fractions and notice them more in the real world, take a look around your kitchen or hang out when someone in your family is cooking and see if you can find some fractions around the kitchen. Maybe looking at labels like on a stick of butter or on measuring cups, looking at those different measurement lines. But just trying to find fractions in the world is a great way to start to see them, think about what they mean, and understand them. Next time we get together, we will come back to fractions and do some practice with how to draw and show unit fractions that we are given. So until then, take care and I'll see you next time.
Hola niños, soy yo, la maestra Lorena Vázquez, con ustedes una vez más y esta, créanlo o no, es nuestra última semana juntos aprendiendo sobre las matemáticas de tercer grado Y estoy un poquito triste sobre eso, pero también feliz de saber que estuvimos practicando durante ya 4 semanas y esta es nuestra quinta semana juntos. Así que ahora que ya han pasado todo este tiempo, ya sabemos mucho sobre la multiplicación, la división y espero que en casa sigan practicando sus tablas de multiplicación y división para que cuando regresen a clases ya estén súper listísimos. Bueno, entonces, ¿están listos para comenzar nuestra última semana juntos? Porque yo sí. Vamos a empezar. Bueno, niños, aquí tenemos el problema que les encargué de práctica la semana pasada, si lo recuerdan muy bien, y vamos a leerlo juntos y resolverlo para poder comprobar nuestras respuestas. Recuerden que la semana pasada estábamos aprendiendo a identificar familias de datos. Identificar quiere decir nombrar o saber cuáles son las familias que caben dentro de esta casita que están relacionados. Recuerden que la división y multiplicación tienen una relación inversa. Quiere decir que es lo opuesto. Y su meta era usar datos de multiplicación y división para resolver problemas de la vida real. Porque recuerden que ese es el chiste cuando estamos aprendiendo matemáticas, es poder aplicarlo a nuestra vida diaria. Bueno, el problema que les dejé para la práctica era, la maestra Dinamarca necesita 30 jugos para su clase. Los jugos vienen en paquetes de 6. ¿Cuántos paquetes necesita? Resuelve. Bueno, aquí tengo una imagen de los juguitos que pueden estar en este paquete, ¿verdad? Y ya sabemos dos de los miembros de esta familia de datos, sabemos el 30 y el 6, y podemos ir aplicándolo. Sabemos que hay dos factores que vamos a multiplicar. Uno de ellos es el 6, y como no importa la orden, en el otro problema de la otra ecuación, vamos a poner el 6 al principio, y cuando multiplicamos, siempre el producto o la respuesta es la cantidad más grande, porque recuerden que la multiplicación es suma repetida y así lo estamos haciendo un número más grande. Está bien. Ahora, también tenemos la mitad de cada ecuación de división. Entonces, sabemos que la cantidad mayor es el cociente, no es cierto, el dividendo. Y el dividendo siempre es primero porque es la cantidad que vamos a dividir. Y sabemos también que una de las respuestas, el 6, viene siendo uno de los divisores. Muy bien. Y en el otro problema, la otra ecuación, el 6 viene siendo un cociente, la respuesta. Ahora solo falta llenar los 4 espacios que nos faltan. Así que, ¿cómo podemos usar la relación inversa de la multiplicación y división? Bueno, algo por 6 es 30. Niños y niñas que han estado practicando, creo que ustedes van a poder hacer esto. ¿Qué tal si tomamos ese 6 y contamos de 5 en 5? 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. Sí, niños, podemos contar de 5 en 5 porque ya sabemos que 5 por 6 son 30. Quiere decir que este número que faltaba en nuestra familia de datos es el 5. Así que sí, tenemos 5 por 6 son 30, 6 por 5, porque no importa la orden de agrupación, también es 30. Y 30 dividido por 6 es 5. Y 30 dividido por 5 son 6. Y así mismo ustedes pueden ir usando la multiplicación o la división para resolver familias de datos. Muy bien, como lo prometido es deuda, esta semana estamos con una nueva meta y un nuevo tema, pero no se preocupen que todo está relacionado. La meta de hoy es, estoy aprendiendo a identificar fracciones. ¿Han escuchado esa palabra antes? La palabra fracciones o fracción. Su criterio de éxito es, puedo describir partes iguales de un entero. Y niños y niñas, esta es nuestra clave. Nuestra palabra del día de hoy es fracción. Cuando ustedes me escuchen decir la palabra fracción, ustedes van a decir parte igual de un entero, porque esa es la palabra clave del día de hoy, iguales. ¿Les suena familiar? ¿En dónde más usamos partes iguales? Si me pongo a pensar, lo usábamos en grupos iguales de división y también grupos iguales de multiplicación. Así que las fracciones también llevan partes iguales. Y como siempre, pueden tener a su mano un lápiz y papel, o una pizarra con marcador o cualquier cosa que les pueda ayudar a comprender el tema de hoy. Vamos a comenzar. Bueno, entonces, una fracción, como ya les dije, perdón, ¿escucharon eso? Fracción. Fracción. Parte igual de un entero. Muy bien. Partes iguales de un entero es precisamente eso. Entonces, vamos a ver estos 4 modelos que tenemos aquí. 1, 2, 3 y 4. Y quiero que tomen un segundo y piensen, ¿cuál de ellos no muestra una fracción? Muy bien. Vamos a pensar. Si es parte igual de un entero, a ver, igual quiere decir lo mismo. Algo entero es algo que está ahí completamente. ¿Ya tienen una idea? Bueno, vamos a analizar cada uno. Primero vamos a tomar esta parte que dice aquí, parte igual, parte igual. Entonces voy a comenzar con eso. Estas 3 partes de aquí son iguales. Sí. Estas 3 partes de aquí son iguales. También se ven iguales. ¿Y qué tal estas 4 partes? También se ven iguales. Pero vamos a ver el segundo modelo de aquí. Vamos a ver las 3 partes. Esta y esta. ¿Las 3 son iguales? ¿Son del mismo tamaño? No. Si ponen mucha atención, esta primera parte, la que está sombreada de azul, es mucho más grande que esta pequeña parte delgada y más grande que esta. Así que, por definición, el segundo modelo no muestra una fracción. Fracción. Parte igual de un entero. Muy bien. ¿Por qué? Porque en una de las partes o las partes no son iguales. Y entero es exactamente lo que dice, todo el modelo entero. Entonces, si tu respuesta fue la segunda, muy bien, empezamos bien. Y como repaso, una fracción, parte igual de un entero. Excelente, es una parte igual de un entero. Y la fracción tiene 2 nombres, tiene 2 números, perdón. El numerador, que es la cantidad de partes iguales sombreadas. Y como pudieron ver en el otro ejemplo, estaban sombreadas de color verde, pero sombreado simplemente quiere decir que está coloreado, como una sombra. El denominador es la cantidad total de partes iguales en entero. ¿Cuántas partes iguales tenemos? Ese es el total, el denominador. Así que vamos a practicar con unos ejemplos, ¿sí? A ver, entonces sabemos que el número de arriba nos dice cuántas partes están sombreadas, cuánto tenemos, y el número de abajo dice partes en el entero. Y recuerden, todas estas partes tienen que ser iguales. Díganlo conmigo, todas las partes de una fracción tienen que ser iguales. Muy bien. Así que vamos a practicar. Vamos a empezar con este círculo. ¿Qué tal si yo pongo una línea aquí? ¿Cuántas partes iguales hay en este ejemplo? Hay en total hay 2 partes iguales, ¿verdad? 2. Y de las partes iguales, ¿cuántas están sombreadas? A ver, ¿qué tal si yo hago esto? Y solo sombreo esta. ¿Cuántas sombreé? Claro, una de las 2 partes. Así que este círculo representa una de 2 partes iguales, que viene siendo una mitad. Muy bien, vamos a intentar un ejemplo más. Miren este rectángulo. Yo lo tengo que dividir en partes iguales. Entonces, voy a tomar esta barrita que ya tengo aquí. A mí me gusta empezar siempre por la mitad. ¿Por qué no lo hacemos en 4 partes iguales? Si ahorita tengo 2 partes, puedo agregar una a la mitad aquí y otra a la mitad aquí. Y acabamos de dividir el rectángulo en 4 partes iguales, niños y niñas. Entonces, sabemos que este rectángulo tiene ¿cuántas partes iguales? Tiene 4 partes iguales. 4. Estos 4 que me dan mucha lata. Muy bien. 4. Ok. Entonces, vamos a sombrear ¿qué cantidad de partes? Bueno, vamos a hacer una y vamos a sombrear 2. Y una más. 3. Claro que no las estoy llenando todas completas, pero cerca. ¿Cuántas partes iguales están sombreadas? 1, 2, 3. Así que esta fracción que tenemos aquí tiene 3 partes sombreadas y 4 partes iguales en todo el rectángulo entero. Entonces, este modelo que tenemos aquí representa 3/4. Fracción. Fracción. Parte igual de un entero. Muy bien. La fracción es 3/4. 3 partes iguales sombreadas de 4 en total. Quiere decir que una de 4 no está sombreada. Muy bien, niños y niñas. Esta es nuestra introducción a las fracciones. Bueno, ya que hemos tenido nuestra introducción, vamos a practicar un poquito más con unos ejemplos para ver si podemos identificar la fracción que está representada en el modelo. Así que empecemos con este primero. Tenemos aquí un rectángulo y en este rectángulo de aquí vamos a contar las partes y primeramente me voy a fijar, ¿todas las partes son iguales? A ver, 1, 2, 3. Yo veo 1, 2, 3 partes y sí, niños y niñas, las 3 partes son iguales. Así que este rectángulo entero, tiene 3 partes iguales. Ahora, de esas 3 partes, ¿cuántas están sombreadas? Vamos a ver, aquí yo cuento 1 y 2. Esta que está en blanco de aquí no está sombreada, así que tenemos 2 de 3 partes sombreadas. 2. Este modelo que tenemos aquí, niños y niñas, representa 2 de 3 partes, así que se dice 2 tercios. 2 tercios. Muy bien, seguimos con otro ejemplo y por favor, si en casa tienen su pizarra, pueden escribir las respuestas ahí, hasta dibujar también el modelo para que tengan un ejemplo en sus cuadernos o en su pizarra. Muy bien, aquí tenemos un círculo entero, pero el círculo está separado en cuántas partes iguales. Vamos a ver, vamos a contar las partes. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hay 4 partes iguales en este círculo. De las 4 partes, ¿cuántas están sombreadas? Vamos a contar. 1, 2, 3. 3 de las 4 partes están sombreadas. Así que este modelo, este círculo, representa 3 de 4 o 3/4. Niños y niñas, ¿no ven que es muy fácil identificar la fracción usando un modelo? Muy bien. Claro que fíjense bien que todas las piezas tienen que ser igualitas, no pueden cambiarse. Siguiente ejemplo. Oh, ahora tenemos un modelo un poquito diferente. Es un rectángulo más angosto de lo que estás viendo aquí. Perdón. A ver, vamos a contar las partes. Primeramente, mírenlo bien. Todas estas partes son iguales. A como yo las veo, todas se ven iguales. Si yo estuviera dibujando un rectángulo y lo dibujara así, ¿podríamos hacer una fracción con esto? No. ¿Saben por qué? Porque todas las partes no son iguales y ese es el requisito número 1 de cuando estamos trabajando con fracciones. Así que vamos a ver cuántas partes hay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 y 8. Hay 8 partes y todas son iguales. Pero ¿cuántas contamos sombreadas? 1, 2, 3. 3 partes iguales sombreadas. Este modelo, niños y niñas, representa 3/8. Vamos a ver cuántas partes iguales hay en esta pizza. Yo cuento este lado y este lado. Yo cuento 2 partes iguales. Falta toda la cantidad de un lado. Este lado de aquí es la mitad y esta es la otra mitad. Y como ya sabemos cómo representar una mitad, 1 de 2, la fracción es 1 de 2, una mitad. Así que por hoy dejaré que practiquen en casa, que lo piensen. Piensen las partes de la fracción. Fracción. Parte igual de un entero. Muy bien, las partes iguales. Y quiero que intenten algo. Tomen una hoja de papel de cualquier tamaño y practiquen partiéndola en partes iguales. Por ejemplo, este papelito yo lo puedo partir en la mitad. Y ahora tengo 2 partes iguales. Tengo una mitad. Pero si tomo este papel y lo vuelvo a doblar, así, al abrirlo, van a ver que tengo 1, 2, 3, 4 partes iguales. ¿Por qué no intentan en casa ustedes con una hoja de papel y a ver cómo les va? Y pueden compartir con sus seres queridos qué es una fracción. Fracción. Parte igual de un entero. Excelente trabajo. Hoy estábamos identificando lo que son las fracciones, describiendo partes iguales de un entero. Mañana continuamos con fracciones unitarias y les doy una pista. Ya comenzamos a aprender eso el día de hoy. Gracias por acompañarme y que tenga buen día. Adiós.